So shall we begin by reading again? Chapter 11, verses 8 through 12. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place which he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was to go. By faith, he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs, heirs with him the same promise. For he looked forward to the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born descendants as many as the stars of heaven and as the innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. So I guess the first issue is actually one of translation. Um, verse 11 reads, by faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. And there's a good deal of discussion about whether that sentence is about Sarah or about Abraham, and whether Sarah is simply mentioned as a parenthetical. So an immediate problem is that the entire section talks about Abraham with Sarah somehow inserted into uh, verse 11 of chapter 11, and with chapter 12 resuming to Abraham, so therefore from one man.
Well, women can get past that age, right, Leonie? I mean, to conceive, yeah. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
that's just our body, the way it goes.
yeah, no, yeah,
Wasn't
there's
she
no
older
question.
than six? Wasn't she really old when she conceived?
Like in her 90s or something.
Yeah, like she was 65, and then 25 years later she had Isaac. So what is that? 70, 90 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we heard of a woman at 70 conceiving, but not 90.
Wow.
Was on the news.
yeah, I mean, that's true, but the question is really one of the translation and what is the author saying rather. I mean, we're not just,
By
he's
faith.
not disputing the Genesis account. The question is he talking about Abraham, or is he talking about Sarah? The problem is that, so our translation reads, by faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. The the power to conceive is means, or is translated, or literally, the literal rendering of it is a power for the casting of a seed. And so it refers to male semen. So that means that it would apply to Abraham and not Sarah. And the problem also is that the subject of the following verse, we have a therefore from one man. And if Sarah is the subject of verse 10, the therefore doesn't follow. It should be therefore from one woman. And so if this were about Sarah conceiving, the phrase should have read something about the reception of semen, not about the casting of seed. So the reception of seed instead of the casting of seed, which both are, sort of, are Hellenistic Greek expressions. So given that this is that the writer author of Hebrews is the most polished writer in the New Testament and the most precise, it seems unusual that he would use the wrong idiom for um, for Sarah, and instead that he is referring to Abraham throughout. So a better translation is probably that Abraham himself received power to conceive. Let me see, there are a number of possibilities. By faith, even though Sarah was past the age, Abraham received power to conceive, since he considered him faithful who had made the promise. Or by faith, Abraham also, together with sterile Sarah, received power for procreation. Or by faith, Abraham, to the benefit of Sarah herself, received strength for procreation. So Abraham seems to be the consistent focus here, with Sarah mentioned as a participant, but not the subject of the sentence. So is everyone familiar with the Abraham accounts?
About the 3 visitors that came and all that.
The 3 visitors is one, yeah. Although the author doesn't.
Said that they were going to conceive in a year.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, does everyone know?
They were angels or something, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's read a little bit about Abraham. Genesis, let's start with verse 27 of chapter 11. So this is the end of the genealogy that produces Abraham, or Abram as he's then called. So his father is Terah. Now these are the descendants of Terah. Terah was the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran was the father of Lot. Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his birth, in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren. She had no child. Terah took Abram his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. When they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you I will curse. And by you all the families of the earth shall bless themselves." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions which they gathered, and the persons that they had gotten in Haran, and they set forth to go to the land of Canaan. When they had come to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. Thence he removed to the mountains on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent. with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negev. And then he goes to Egypt. So God tells him to leave, and he leaves. The interesting thing about that is that Canaan was their original destination, at least the original destination of his father. And they stop before they reach Canaan. We have the journey to Egypt. Does anyone remember what happens in Egypt? Well, Abraham is faithful, but he has his faults.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the her handmaid or something?
Not yet. I don't.
Not yet.
Not
Okay.
yet. Were the Egyptians going to try and kill him because he did something? What did he do?
Well, they didn't try to kill him. He decided that because Sarai was a beautiful woman.
Oh,
And
yes, he said
Yeah.
it was his
Yeah.
sister.
Yeah.
So he lied and said that she was his sister,
Right.
which made
Not
her
good.
available to men. Let's
And the
read
king,
about.
was it the king that found out that she was his wife?
Yeah, Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's read about that.
Yeah, they took her to the palace.
It's chapter 12, verse 11. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful to behold, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared on your account. Now, nobody has actually threatened to kill him yet. He's, sort of speculating. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. When the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, he donkeys, men servants, maid servants, she donkeys, and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his home with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say, she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and be gone. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they set him on the way with his wife and all that he had. So he lies. And because he lies and presents Sarai as his wife, and she's taken into Pharaoh's household, he therefore gains in prestige.
Presents Sarah as a sister.
Yeah, he therefore gains in prestige and enriches himself effectively, through prostituting his wife.
Oh,
So that's a little bit off color.
A little bit.
A little bit. Just, tiny bit. But so notice God points out to him Canaan as the land that he's promised. And he nevertheless goes to Egypt, to the court of Pharaoh, Sarah goes to the court of Pharaoh. What's also, sort of interesting is that Abram is an urban person. In Chaldea is a very urbanized city. It's at that point one of the major centers of the Middle East. So he goes to Haran, and then Cairo is a major city. But for the most part, he pitches a tent or lives in tents. So he returns, he Lot, he separates from Lot. Lot is taken captive. He rescues Lot. Coming back, he meets Melchizedek. Then, after Melchizedek, God makes a covenant with Abraham. It's part of God's promise, but it's also, remember, given that the author is so focused on covenants, it's also good to review the covenant itself. So it's
Okay,
chapter
so
15.
15, okay.
Yeah, we'll jump a bit. But after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. And then Abram replies, but Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, behold, you have given me no offspring, and a slave born in my house will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. This man shall not be your heir. Your own son shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, look toward heaven and number the stars, if you are able to number them. Then he said, so shall your descendants be. And he believed the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. So that's important. And he believed the Lord and reckoned it to him as righteousness. And he, that's Yahweh, said to him, I am the Lord who brought you from Ur, the land of the Chaldeans, to give you this land to possess. But he said, O Lord God, how am I to know that I shall possess it? He said to him, well, then he says, bring me a heifer 3 years old, etc. And then in verse 12, as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram. And behold, a dread and great darkness fell upon him. Then the Lord said to Abram, know of a surety that your descendants will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be slaves there, and they will be oppressed for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation which they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for yourself, you shall go to your fathers in peace, and you shall be buried in good old age. Then verse 17, when the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces of the sacrificial animals. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. And so notice it's the making of a covenant. So remember, the sacrificial animal represents what's going to happen to the participant of the covenant in the event that the covenant is broken. Right? So you sacrifice the animal. If you break the covenant, you die, just like the sacrificial animal did. But this is a unilateral covenant. So Abram hasn't offered anything for the sacrifice because the covenant is the promise of the covenant, enforcing the covenant, and the surety of the covenant is solely God. So God promises, God enforces, and God is saying that in the event that I violate this covenant, I will die, which of course is not possible. but nevertheless, that's, the essential part of the covenant ceremony. And then we go to chapter 18, and just like you had wanted to, Carmen. Actually, in doing that, we skip Hagar and Ishmael.
Oh,
And
right.
so Abram is promised a son, and he decides that, God helps he who helps himself. 16, yeah.
16. Okay.
Okay. Verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. She had an Egyptian maid whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my maid. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her maid, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And Sarai said to Abram, may the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my maid to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me. But Abram said to Sarai, behold, your maid is in your power. Do to her as you please. Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she, that is Hagar, fled from her. So God helps he who helps himself. And so they kind of anticipate, decide to uh, create offspring by themselves rather than simply waiting for God. And then we have the meeting with the angels, which is in chapter 18, verse 1. And the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men stood in front of him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, my Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourself under the tree. While I fetch a mound of bread that you may refresh yourself, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant. So they said, do as you have said. And Abram hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf tender and good and gave it to the servant who hastened to prepare it. Then he took curds and milk and the calf which he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, where is Sarah, your wife? And he said, she is in the tent. The Lord said, I will surely return to you in the spring, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advancing in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I have grown old and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure? The Lord said to Abraham, why does Sarah laugh and say, shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you in the spring, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. He said, no, but you did laugh. And then Isaac, the heir of the promise, is born. So Abraham has faith, but he and Sarah have some major lapses. So the author left out some things about Abraham. Is that legitimate? Should he have mentioned them?
I mean, the people knew, right? Abraham was very well-known figure, I'm assuming, to the Jewish people.
The father of all three of Islam, of Judaism, and of Christianity.
That's right. Wow.
Yeah. We are all children of Abraham. Should he have mentioned those things?
Like when Sarah offered her maid, I mean, she was trying to, she was going to try to help him along with his
Promise.
promise of children.
Uh-huh.
She felt that she was way too old, and so was he. And it was also promised that she would have a son. But that was after, yeah, that was after Ishmael.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There has to be, there has to be somebody, because the promise, before there was a specific promise of within a year that you'll have a son, is that your descendants would be as numerous as the
stars.
sand of the seashore or the stars in the sky.
Yeah.
So there has to be an offspring in there somewhere. So the question is how do you produce it? And God helps he who helps himself is the let's help God speed things along. We don't really want to make God a liar, and so and a mess follows. I mean, the whole thing is a disaster. But so should the author have mentioned it? Is that legitimate that he left it out? I mean, in some sense, has he falsified the account of Abraham by leaving it out? Or why might he have?
Is it Isaac the legitimate heir, if you want to call it legitimate?
Yeah, Isaac is
Isaac
is the.
And so, why bring up the illegitimacy of Ishmael?
Well, it's not necessarily the illegitimacy.
Well, I mean, it wasn't from Sarah.
It's the issue is in many ways that Abraham had some major flaws, and those aren't mentioned. So
Well,
the question,
was that common during the early, before Sarah got conceived? Was that something that you do, offer your handmaiden or something if you couldn't have children? So that was common. So
it was common, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So the Jewish Christians would have understood that. So I don't know why the Hebrew author didn't mention it.
That may be why. So everybody is familiar with Abraham because he's foundational, and especially if Gentile Christians aren't familiar, and certainly Jewish Christians are familiar. And so all of Abraham's faults are going to, be well known. So the big thing about this, so he's mixing
Holiness.
theology with exhortation. And so he's leaving, this out because in some sense, Abraham's faults are often our own faults. So in order to, help God along, Abraham didn't fully trust God, at least, at that time. And so we have a tendency, and the author's audience has a tendency, which is why he's writing this in the first place, to not trust God sufficiently. And we all have a tendency to not trust God sufficiently.
That's what I meant by he was just like everybody else. He had his faults. He was truly a human and tried to do things.
It's a direct linkage that would link Abraham to his audience. Going back to chapter 10, verse 23, he says, "Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful." And let us consider how to stir up one another, etc. But let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. Remember, the confession of our hope he defines in verse 25, which is the day drawing near. So the day of the Lord, the second coming, the new heaven and the new earth. So that's the hope that we confess and we hold fast to, and he's urging us, urging his readers, urging us to hold fast to it, for he who promised is faithful. So then notice also in verse, I'll read the translation here rather than what is probably a more accurate translation. But by faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. So that considering faithful he who promised links this. So in some sense, this is about Abraham and Sarah, but this is also about us. Do we consider he who promises to be faithful? How is faith expressed in Abraham's life?
How does Abraham express his faithfulness?
Yeah.
By trusting God.
What are the elements of that trust?
Well, his wife gets pregnant, and then his descendants are numerous.
He had to sojourn and live in tents and just keep moving.
And he left when God told him to leave.
Yeah.
Faith sustained him on the way. Faith produces patience. Going back to what I think is the first mention of Abraham in chapter 6, verse 13, for when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, surely I will bless you and multiply you. So that's that making of the covenant with Abraham. Thus, Abraham, having patiently endured, obtained the promise. So, patience. That patience is also stressed in right before that reading in chapter 6, verse 11. And we desire each one of you to show the same my translation says earnestness. It's also translated as patience. The Greek word is makrothemia, So the same macrothemia in realizing the full assurance of hope until the end, so that you may not be sluggish, but imitators of those who, through faith and patience, inherit the promises. So patience is critical to faith. And so notice he says in verse 4, by faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. The with is misleading, since they're not actually together in tents, since Jacob is born only after Abraham's death, but they all live in tents as they sojourn. So they're all patiently awaiting the promise. There's one other major element of faith, at least. It sort of contrasts with God helps he who helps himself. It's the knowledge that nothing is impossible for God, that God can do something wondrous, that God can do the impossible. So here in verse 12, therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead. So he's as good as dead. His wife is sterile. There's no hope of a child. And the result is Isaac. And then later in verse 19, it's about the sacrifice of Isaac. It says, he considered that God was able to raise men even from the dead. Hence, he did receive him back, and this was a symbol. The author implies that Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac because he believed that even if Isaac was dead, that God could raise him from the dead. So what about that notion that we're but sojourners?
Well, he
What
was
is that?
wondering, he was trying to find the place that he was promised.
Uh-huh. Right. And what was he promised?
For he looked forward to the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God.
Uh-huh. So he looked forward to the heavenly Jerusalem. So he was just a sojourner, and the promise is the heavenly Jerusalem. So what does that have to do with us? Does anyone remember Healy's comment about the origin of the word perish? Sojourn means to inhabit as a stranger, to be a resident alien. One might even say to be an illegal immigrant. So the Greek word is parokizon, and it's the root word of parish and parochial. So parish and parochial are intended to reflect not that this is a religious institution, which is what we usually think, but that we are sojourners. This is not our home. We look forward to a city whose foundation is built by God.
Yeah.
So it's a city with real foundations. So how does that relate to, especially to today?
Well, we have to keep our eyes on God and not let things of this earth sway us from being focused on Him.
Mm-hmm. So what does that, sort of mean concretely, particularly in terms of contemporary America and Christianity in contemporary America?
Well, we have to follow Scripture.
Although, there's an enormous amount of, disagreement about what Scripture says and the meaning of Scripture. It's not like there are, some very, very sharp divides in the way in which Scripture is understood.
But there's
Uh,
two main commandments, right? And one is to keep God. God is our only, there's only one God.
mhm,
And that we need to love one another as ourselves.
uh-huh. But then we,
Yeah, those are the
but-
most important things to keep in mind.
but then we get into that question that Jesus was asked, who is my neighbor?
Who's my brother? And oh yeah, we are all sons of God, right?
So,
We're all children of God.
well, yes, we are. I mean, certainly, but are we in Christianity in America today?
Well, we pray for one another. I mean, we have no way of controlling what's happening.
We do, but I mean, what I'm really, sort of pointing to is the rise of Christian nationalism in America today, and especially, well, not especially as part of that, the extreme anti-immigrant sentiment that immigrants are poisoning our blood. That, is a very Christian phenomenon. Ours is, a godly nation based on Judeo-Christian principles. And, we need to return to that foundation. That's the basis of Christian nationalism. And we need to stop people poisoning our blood. That's from Mein Kampf and from Donald Trump. So what about that? So we're sojourners
Yeah.
on this earth. We
Yeah.
look forward to a city whose foundation
Mhm.
is built by God. On the other hand, we have Christian nationalists, Christian nationalism, which has become very widespread in Christianity,
Yeah.
particularly in evangelical Christianity, but even in Catholicism among some Catholics. So, its principles are that ours is a godly nation. Our founding fathers were Christians. They're the American legal system is based on Judeo-Christian principles, and we've lost that and have to return to being a godly nation. And part of that return to being a godly nation is, well, I mean, to put it bluntly, keeping out those Catholics who are trying to come in from the South. That's one way of looking at it. There are, others, but or keeping out those who are poisoning our blood. So then the question is, where are they sojourning?
Some of them are coming from countries that have dictators, and they're looking for
No, no,
safety for their family.
that's not really, I mean, yes, that's true, but that's not the point.
Well, we're supposed to take care of our brothers and sisters.
Right, we are, but Christian nationalism doesn't want to, right? I mean, they're poisoning our blood. And most of them are Catholic, incidentally, which should for us be, for those of those Catholics who are Christian nationalists, should be a really sobering fact, because there's a major element of anti-Catholicism in Christian nationalism. I mean, we should be concerned that if Christian nationalism takes hold, as Catholics will be persecuted. And, many large numbers of evangelicals don't even consider us Christians in the first place.
Mm.
So, I mean, the point here is that we're supposed to be sojourners. And we recognize that this is temporary, that not only individually, but as a people, that we're on a journey to somewhere else,
Yeah.
to a city whose foundation is built by God, that all of this is transitory. And so, but Christian nationalism would seem to imply that we're a nation whose foundation is built by God, right? There's no need to sojourn anywhere because we're here. We just have to keep out. I mean, there are two problems. There are vermin, and there are those poisoning the blood. The vermin are the people, such as myself, who don't agree. And those poisoning the blood are primarily those Catholics coming in from the South. So both of those are from Mein Kampf. And both of those were, quoted by Trump. So we have vermin and we have poisoners of the blood, and there's no sojourning. Christian nationalists aren't sojourning anywhere because they're here. All they have to do is, make America great again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Restore us to our Christian roots.
Yeah, they're thinking they're at the place already. They got no place else to go. They're already here. There is no heavenly homeland for them. They're in great America. They need to open it up to all, whether they're Christians or not. And then they can sojourn to the heavenly home rather than just the American Christian. In charge of that, the president?
What?
Who would be in charge of that place?
Which president? I don't
I
think.
mean, just a president. If it's in America, any one of the presidents, And,
Well, I mean, it would have to be, it would have to be Trump, or it would have to be, someone like him.
mhm.
The emergence of Christian nationalism is a really, sort of frightening thing because it's not Christian. Although, the people propounding it claim to be. It, they're not sojourning. There's, been a lot of writing by so-called evangelical historians about, how the founding fathers were Christian, and our, legal system is based on Judeo-Christian principles. In fact, it's based on Roman law. No Judeo-Christian principles. So, the whole thing is the founding fathers were predominantly deists, non-Christians.
Mhm.
And so the whole thing is based on a lie.
Mhm.
Not sojourning anywhere. They've arrived
Yeah.
and want to hold on to what they've got. And it's in a lot of ways, it's a striking, I guess, it's a counterpoint. It counterposes. It's a counterpoint to faith, or it's really almost an antithesis of faith. Faith is a belief in things that are not seen. Faith is a belief in God's promises. Faith is a belief that what God has said, what God has promised, is true for us as a people of God. In fact, for humanity. And so this just isn't the antithesis of that, exclusionary. I'm going to invent God's promises and I'm going to seize them for myself and make it all work for me and demonize people whenever I can.
Yeah.
So in other words, we're taking things into our own hands again.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. And that has profound consequences. I mean, not only does that, if they come to power, do immediate damage, but atheism has become much more publicly vocal than I've ever known it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so the interesting thing is that, if you listen to any of the atheist critiques, as Catholics, we should be able to agree with, we usually can agree with all of them, because what they're critiquing is this kind of, Christian nationalism, evangelicalism that is, sharply in conflict with the traditional values of Christianity. They're, critiquing selfishness, which, seems to be mandated by God in the prosperity gospel. They're critiquing all of these things that they consider Christianity, that we also would critique, that are outside of the bounds of traditional Christianity, of Orthodox Christianity, of things that Orthodox Christianity would condemn, does condemn. And so we see, on the one hand, faith. We see on the other hand, faith, which is looking forward to the promises of God, of believing in the promises of God and knowing that they're certain, and knowing that those promises are about the return of Christ and a new heaven and a new earth. So that's certain. We're sojourners until that happens, as opposed to God is there to make me rich. God's role is to bless me. Now, give me yachts, give me airplanes.
I'll
Yeah.
just add one thing there.
Yeah.
There's a new movie, it's a documentary called God and Country produced by Rob Reiner that's
Uh-huh.
just on that topic. So I suggest that if anybody has an opportunity, I haven't seen it. I just, found it. So, but controversial for sure.
Uh-huh. This is becoming very concerning. And it's very concerning when people who claim to be Christian, and there's so many of them,
Yeah,
are just at so much at variance with what I consider to be Orthodox Christianity.
I think it's been very concerning for several years, at least back in 2016 when Trump became the president.
Right, right. But it's becoming more concerning since he's
Definitely.
launched an insurrection.
Yeah.
Denies that he lost an
But
election.
people are Christians. There are Christians of the mind that, hey, it's okay if Trump's, not even, Christian because he's doing what we want him to do. Like in my mind, it's almost like a definition of the Antichrist. It's just. But anyways,
It's worldly morality. It's that the end justifies the means.
Mm.
We've talked about that at when we were studying Matthew, and Jesus has the parables of the kingdom, which concern the morality of the kingdom. The end does not justify the means. Only every means itself has to be justified.
And it's not trusting God. It's
Trusting man.
trusting what we can do.
Right. It's trust in what we can do, and that our action will produce the desired end. It leaves God completely out of it.